Hello, guys, and welcome back to Pop Culture Addicts. I am Tim. I am your host, and I am the head nerd around this here nerd rodeo. I don't know where I'm going with that, but hey, whatever. You're used to it by this point. Anyway, this is a show that's made by nerds for nerds, so welcome to the show. Now, our guest today, waiting off stage in the virtual green room, he's an actor. He's a voice actor, and he does extensive work for Skywalker Sound. So I'm very excited to talk to him about sound design and sound engineering. Now, you've seen or heard his work on shows and video games like Maul, Shadow Lord, The Mandalorian, Skeleton Crew, Star Wars Force Unleashed, and nearly every other Star Wars project over the last 20 years. Now, over in our chat tonight, we're going to discuss his origin story, his work as Spybot on Maul, his sound design and editor work on Maul, and some various other projects, and what it's like wearing different hats in the entertainment world. Now, if you're new here, I want to remind you that clicking that like and follow button makes sure that you don't miss out on other great interviews coming up. Not great because of me, but great because of the people who have agreed to be on the show. So don't miss out on that. At this time, let's welcome David W. Collins to Pop Culture Addicts. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, Tim. So good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you. I'm so excited. I've wanted to have you on the show for quite a while.
Oh, great.
All the way back to when I first started this show, which we're going on our 6th year. I've wanted to have you on the show since the beginning when I realized that you were the voice of Proxy in Star Wars Force Unleashed, because to say that I had an addiction to that game would be a vast understatement.
Oh, cool. That's great.
Yeah. Loved that game. And I loved your interactions with Starkiller as Proxy. And it was a lot of fun to watch and listen to. And I still have the games. I still play them from time to time, but yeah,
that's awesome. You can see my my Dark Side Ending sideshow collectible Starkiller here in the background, by the way, just
love it
next to Maul and Luke and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm so glad you like that game. I'm so proud of that game, and that was a huge undertaking. I can't believe it's been 18 years as of this recording. Almost 18 years since that game released. It's just wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It feels like yesterday.
Yeah, it's crazy. Time flies when you blink. So, Well, David, the first question I like to ask everybody who comes on the show, unless they've been on, a couple times before, this is my standard opening question because I'm a nerd, but I do this for 2 reasons. Number one, I like to know what makes people tick, why they do what they do, why they continue to do this job, and why they keep coming back to it. And secondly, as I mentioned, being a nerd, we love a good origin story as nerds. And so in the origin of David W. Collins, what made you say, I need to work in entertainment?
It's a weird thing. I always just knew from a very, very young age. And there was never going to be a question in my mind. I mean, ever. It was something that, and I actually attribute a lot of this to seeing Star Wars as a kid. At my age, it came out when I was too young to remember seeing it, and it was always just a part of my life. And I think that something like Star Wars, which just it takes advantage of so much of what cinema is about, so much of what music can do for cinema, sound effects, sound design, story, character, performance, visual effects, fantasy. I mean, it just had it all. And I remember, when I was a kid, seeing it, thinking that everything else was trying to get to that level, but never could. I was of that age where you would see all of the sort of Star Wars copycats that would play on Showtime or whatever, and so Star Wars just came out, and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and that all of those movies of the early 80s were huge in my childhood. So I started doing theater. I started taking music lessons. I was doing local, anything I could do, commercials, this is all in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in Vacaville, California. And I really just tried to get involved in any way that I could. And, for a while, Star Wars went quiet. But it really came roaring back in the 90s with the books and the video games. And that was around the time that I was in high school, college. And I really got back into it. So when I was trying to think about what my next steps were, and I was doing a ton of theater, and I was playing in bands, and I was doing anything I could to sort of prepare myself for some kind of career in entertainment, the internet was kind of a new thing, and I saw an internship application at Lucasfilm, and I thought, well, that's interesting. But I wasn't ready. Went off and did more school at Berklee College of Music. Started getting really. I was in and out of recording studios all the time with bands that I was in, and so I started learning how to use those, and became really interested in Skywalker Sound in my late teens, early 20s because of all of the movies they were doing: Jurassic Park, Saving Private
Hmm.
Ryan, Titanic, Forrest Gump. All of these huge movies that were coming out, and so I geared all my classes towards going there, not even realizing that I grew up an hour from Skywalker Ranch. That hadn't even factored in my head. I still thought of it as like New York or LA or something like that. But I ended up working at the ranch as an intern in the summer of 1999, the same month the Phantom Menace came out. On their scoring stage there, an hour from where I grew up, and that was pretty wild. And from that came all these other opportunities, in terms of voiceover and hosting and sound design and music. And it's been a wild, wild ride ever since.
So I'm assuming that you and I have to be pretty similar in age based on some of the things you're saying. So I
Yeah,
was born in 76,
75. Yeah, I was born in
75.
75.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh
All
yeah,
right.
you got a big one coming up this year.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you
Trust me,
do.
my low back reminds me every morning.
I'm so sorry.
my wife my wife tells me all the time, "Yeah, you're making old man noises again." I'm like, "Well, that's because I'm getting old. That's just what it is." So I'm just bought into the bit at this point. Um, but yeah, it's interesting for me to hear it from your perspective, talking about how Star Wars was just always a part of your world.
Hmm.
And for me, it was very much the same growing up. Star Wars was, the original trilogy was everything to me, and the amount of times I feigned an illness so I could stay home and watch the trilogy.
Yep.
Just lay on the couch and watch the trilogy. Well,
Well, and it was and
it's mother,
Industrial Light
I'm
and
dying.
Yeah, I was going to say that ILM was a huge part of that too. It wasn't just Star Wars; it was also Indiana Jones, which of course was Lucasfilm,
Sure,
Willow. But more than that, I would go see a Star Trek movie, and it would say Industrial Light and Magic, and I would go see, any big visual effects movie, and it would say Industrial Light and Magic. Terminator, Skywalker Sound, Industrial Light and Magic. Terminator 2. The Abyss. Like that stuff was just constantly coming at me, and I don't know why I was so in tune to that stuff. I have an older brother. He was a great baseball player. I think the reason we're so close as adults is because we were never in each other's lanes. I was terrible at baseball, terrible at basketball. Did it for years. Played little league for like 7 years. And just never quite felt like I fit in like I did when I kind of found what it was that I was supposed to do, and just poured myself into it. But yeah, I mean, it was really those companies I thought were the center of the world. Pixar comes out of it.
yeah,
um so much comes out of it. LucasArts, I was a huge fan of LucasArts years before I worked there, and so that was really, it became really clear to me that was a good company to maybe try and investigate, and then hopefully end up working for someday, if only. And then it happened,
sure.
and I just kind of held on for dear life as the projects came my way, and been working ever since, learning and growing, and keeping the entertainment industry journey going.
That's fantastic. I love stories like that because I always tell people that um, the dream I have is that one day that I'll see my name somewhere uh, in the credits of a Star Wars something, and I'm like, I don't care if it says paperclip holder. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
that's the dream, and but I love hearing, like I had a conversation once with Chris Bartlett, who
uh-huh,
and
yeah,
Chris told me his story about how he went from just being a cosplayer to, and not just a cosplayer, you know what I mean by that, but
yeah,
being a cosplayer, and then eventually graduating up to working for Lucasfilm and all the things that he's doing, and it's just
yeah.
amazing story. And I love people seeing people live their dream and be so excited and so attached to it.
Chris
So
Bartlett, I've known Chris for a long time, and Chris and I once did a Star Wars Galaxy's press summit in Sydney, Australia in 2006, where he was in full C-3PO gear. And I
Awesome.
was like helping push him up a ramp so he didn't fall, so he could get on stage and do his thing. And I'm like, this guy's really good. And he was still in, I think, the video game business at that point, and so was I, because it
Mhm.
was a LucasArts summit, and we were speaking there about whatever was going on in 2006. But Galaxies was part of it, Star Wars Galaxies, and so
Okay.
that's when I first met Chris, and I've just watched, his career, just as he's pursued his dreams and become all these different characters in the age of Disney Plus, and
Yeah.
that's been really cool to watch.
Yeah. Very cool, dude. All right. So that's a cool story about how you got in the business, why you're in the business, why you stick around the business. But now let's talk about the most recent business. And that,
Yeah,
of course, is Maul Shadow Lord.
Maul
Season one
Shadow
was
Lord.
phenomenal.
Oh,
Holy
thank you,
cow. And I do
thank you.
mean, holy cow. And for those of you who haven't finished season one, there's about to be a very large spoiler for you. Um, um, because by this point, the season's been over for a few weeks. And I am so sad that Spybot is dead.
That is a big spoiler, but yeah, we should
Yeah.
probably talk about it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like, tremendously sad that Spybot is dead. He was honestly one of my favorite characters. I love the snarky one-liners and the little
Oh,
things and
cool.
just the things like that. But I let my buddy Jeff over at another podcast named called Star Wars Safe Space. We were talking, and I said, "Hey, you were a big fan of Spybot as well." And
Yeah.
he had a question that he wants to ask, and so I said, "Sure, give it to me, and I'll put it on the air."
Yeah.
So this is Jeff's question from over at Star Wars Safe Space about this. He said, Spybot seemed to have an unusual level of loyal puppy affection for Maul
Yeah.
that even Maul himself reciprocated. Now, was this something that you and Sam worked out together, having worked together previously as Master Droid in Force Unleashed?
That's a great question. Yeah, does the Proxy Starkiller relationship inform the Spybot Maul
Yes.
relationship? Sam, I mean, it's a larger answer, I suppose. Sam and I go way back. I mean, he went to Juilliard with my best friend and theater partner, my childhood best friend and theater partner growing up, and and I was introduced to Sam right around the time that I started at LucasArts. As Sam is an actor, he's a musician, and he's not just a Star Wars fanatic, but a video game fanatic. And he found out you worked at LucasArts. He wants to meet you. And I said, that sounds great. And at that time, he had just moved to LA and was starting to book guest spots on different shows. And eventually
Mm-hmm.
that led to Battlestar Galactica and Dexter and some of these other shows that he did. And as I progressed through LucasArts, I started voice directing and then casting. And we just became really close friends, starting around 2000, 2001. And we still are. And so a lot of those sort of back and forth, quips and things like that with Proxy and Starkiller were very much just from our friendship. I mean, I had started voice acting at LucasArts, and that theater kid in me was coming out again while I was there, and had gotten an agent and was booking stuff and was already voicing things in video games by around 2004, 2005. And when Proxy came up, I was in fact, in Force Unleashed, I was reading every character across from anyone who was auditioning. I mean, I would read Leia across from someone that was reading
Sure.
as someone. I would read anything. And so when we got to the table read, because we had our core cast and we were going to do our motion capture and our likeness capture with ILM, this was in early 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I just was reading all the different characters. I read Vader. I read Bail Antilles, or Bail Organa. Sorry, Bail Antilles, different. Bail Organa. And before we had Jimmy Smits. And I read Proxy, and the room just kind of got electrified, and I started improvising and things like that. And that kind of back and forth friendship where it's the way Sam describes it is, that scene in Uncharted, or if you've ever played Uncharted video
Mm-hmm.
games, where someone like gives someone a boost and they lift them up, and then they're up there and they put their hand down and then they boost them up. That's
Right.
kind of been our entire career together. And he's so talented and so passionate and very
Yes.
smart and dedicated. And, you know, so we talk pretty much every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And he's just been kind of my sort of ride or die through this whole industry for years. And when our paths
Love it.
cross, that's just the best. And so with Spybot was very much like, I don't think it was necessarily planned that way. There was a Maul show, and the Maul casting came out of Force Unleashed, because Dave Filoni saw Force Unleashed and he cast Sam as Mortis in season 3 of the Clone Wars. That went
Mhm.
extremely well. So then he brought him back to play Maul. And then, so when it was time for Maul to have its own show, I meanwhile had been, doing voices for Dave in Ahsoka season 1 and Tales of the Underworld. And so when Spybot came up, the question was, sorry, this is a very long answer. The question was,
Love it.
what is this going to be? Is this going to be talking, or is it going to be sound effects? We want him to speak a little bit because he's always by himself. So he doesn't have anyone to bounce the other side of the conversation off of. And it was Filoni, this is my understanding anyway, that said, give it to Collins. He'll figure it out, you know? And so suddenly I was in the same show with Sam again as a droid. And maybe that was something that Filoni, was picking up on, like, oh, that would probably work. I don't remember why, but it would probably work. Or maybe it was conscious. I really don't know. But, Spybot talks a lot because no one really talks back to him. He talks to himself a lot. He just kind of exudes joy, and the head scratching and the petting was in the script from the beginning. So that's Brad Rao and Matt Miknovitz. They knew that they wanted almost like a bulldog or a cat, and I
Okay.
think the noir influence was part of that too. You think about The Godfather with his cat in that opening scene, and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so he's got this kind of other side to him that they thought would be really interesting. The So that part I think was just in the script from the get go, and then I ended up happening to play it. Uh, but the rest of Spybot, in terms of the joy that he exudes and the devotion, they let me improvise all of those lines, you
Oh,
know.
that's fantastic. Yeah.
And because at first it was just like it was just all nonsense. And the more I did it, it was like, you know, um, it was a little bit more about Maul returning and I was worried, that sort of thing, and then being trash talking everyone else, but when it comes to Maul, it's like, Ma, that sort of thing. And I just played up on that, that no matter what, he would be loyal to Maul the way that a dog would be loyal to its master. I have 2 dogs, and Sam has 3 dogs, and
Yes.
we when he died, I really wanted it to be that moment where, if a pet is hurt, or let's say it's a John Wick type of moment, or a child or something, in that moment,
Right.
Maul is confused, or not Maul, Spybot is confused, he is hurt, he is scared, and the only thing he's going to do is just lock eyes with his master and just reach out, almost like a scared kid to its
Right.
parent,
Yeah.
in those final moments. I'm scared. Things are going dark. And then he's just gone. And I really was happy that they took that read that I did, because I would improvise a lot of different versions. And I just wanted this sort of master, like just focus
Hmm.
on him, and then they animated it so well with Maul's reaction where he's
Oh,
so
yeah.
angry, and they made it a moment. And I'm really glad they did that because that character really evolved over the season. From being kind of just a gibberish droid to being more like a very gleeful maniac, and who has
Loved it.
opinions, very strong opinions about everything.
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was definitely an evolution.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a chemistry there that people pick up on, and once it was in place, we just really leveraged it as much as we could to try and make that a great relationship. I also think that people responded well to Spybot because he was a way into that gang, and that gang seems very stoic and impenetrable almost. Seeing Maul be affectionate with anybody is a big deal, but
Yeah.
Scorn and Icarus don't say much. Rook is all business. Meanwhile, Spybot's living his best life. He's just like tearing up ships and, trash talking probe droids and causing chaos,
Yes.
and they just let me be weird and make myself laugh, and that worked. And I love that about Spybot. So yeah, I'm very pleased that I got to play that in season 1.
Thank God they did, because that
Yeah.
there were several times where I rewound it because I was like, did he just? I'm like, boop, boop. Yep, yeah, that's what he said. Okay.
Wait. Did he just say impy shinies? What?
Yeah.
And that's actually part of the allure too, is that he's a little hard to understand. When he saw so many impy shinies, you're just like, what did he just say?
Oh,
He flies away,
love that.
and it's just the show also, when I first saw it, was very dark, like shockingly, I'm like, wow, this is a really dark show. Let's kind of add some levity to some of these scenes, and so I just would improvise things, and then in the back half they really started animating to that stuff, like the no touchy thing in chapter 9, and the good luck staying alive, lousy boyo, and spitting at the Jedi, and all that's all just like, what if he did this? Maul's back, it's great. Who are these two? What? Wait, they're coming back with us? These two? Really? That's just to have those moments in the show. I think helps just give you a chance to take your breath, and again is a point of access into Maul. The other thing I'll say is that, if I don't know this for sure because Brad won't tell me, but when you're an actor, you have to come up with a backstory of things. My backstory is that Maul clearly built Spybot. So if Spybot's out just having this joyous time, that's a reflection of Maul, or what Maul wishes he could be but can't. He's an extension of Maul. He is literally Maul's eyes and ears above the surface. As Maul is stuck in the underworld, he's out there watching what's going on and reporting back. That's his entire job. That's his name. But he's having a great time doing it. And I love the idea that why would Maul do that? Why would he make him that way if he didn't want to be surrounded by that? If he didn't want that component in his inner circle, and of a young Zabrak robbed of his childhood, and would have some kind of way of expressing some kind of happiness somehow. Well, I'm just going to put it in this little thing, and this little jerk is going to run around and be my alter ego, maybe. That's how I like to think of it. And
no,
so
I think
that's how
great.
I played it. And it's why I laughed so much. I did so much laughter, even in the opening episode. It's just like, he's loving life. Yes, I get to jam the comms. Oh, yes. That stuff is fun,
Yeah.
Why not have some fun with it? It's Star Wars. I think, George, when we were working on Force Unleashed, I think George said to Jim Ward, who said to us that Star Wars should be around 20-25% comedy. You need to have that kind of lift in order to keep it from getting really heavy, because it is a very heavy mythological family drama. Yeah, or can be, So give it something to give people a breather. Yeah, give people a way in.
I always think it's good when you have a serious topic to have but that's also my dark humor showing through. I feel it's good to have a little bit of levity, even if it points you a little bit in the dark humor area. I think that's always good for a show. And especially, there are a lot of dark even with everything that you've done, it's neat to know that it was dark to begin with, because it's a very heavy 10 episodes, a lot of emotions and things. We learn a lot about Maul and his backstory and everything else. So that's when he's looking in, it's almost heartbreaking, really, when he's looking in that that little puddle, and he's looking at he's seeing reflections of his former self, his younger Maul, and the pre-Darth stages, and just it's kind of an interesting thing. So
it's a tricky thing when you're making a show about a villain, because he still is a villain. I mean, you see that in the last episode. But if you're going to make a series about him, you need to, villains are always the heroes of their own story. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting to see that. It's interesting to see where his pain comes from and why he is so broken. Why is he the way that he is?
Absolutely.
Why is he so obsessed with this idea of revenge? Why does he feel so wronged? I always told Sam I thought he was the dark side Hamlet. You know, he's been wronged, and he is
Yeah.
going to stir things up, and it's going to affect everyone around him in the worst way. You know, but you know that chapter 8 episode was a lot of conversation and really evolved, you know, between Brad and Matt Miknovitz and Sam talking and talking, and Athena Portillo talking and talking, and then they gave it to me, and we did some experiments, and they gave it to the Kiner, who did some experiments, and it was a real iterative. It was a very iterative process to arrive at that sort of vision quest that he goes on in that episode to get it to where it finally landed. And it's dark. It's dark, but
Oh, for
it's
sure. Yeah.
also, there's a sweetness to it because
Yeah.
it humanizes Maul in a way that makes you, why are we telling this story? If you don't,
Yeah.
if you're not going to give us more information about this character, then why are we doing it? You know, and that is why.
100%. Yep.
That, you know, you know that he wants revenge. You know he's got this plan. You know, we've got Devon's journey, we've got Lawson, we've got all these great new characters, but what's going on with Maul? You know, besides just being cool and being, you know, scary, you know, or mustache
Hmm.
twirling, let's like crack this open a little bit. And I think Spybot's a part of that. You know, I think that
Agree.
having Spybot, you know, it's just another side of the psychology that makes it a little more complicated for him, for people when they think about how complex Maul is.
Oh, for sure. And having that point of view of it being a an extension of Maul's personality really does kind of change the shift of focus and how I looked at Spybot. And not that I saw him specifically as just comic relief, but I there was things about his personality that I really did enjoy, the snarkiness and the little spite and some of the things he would say. But now seeing it through that lens kind of helps me see that, hey, this is a microcosm of Maul's personality. So that really
Well,
does help.
why do people get pets? You know, I just like to think, you know, it's because they feel like they have something to give. Why do people have children?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you have this sort of maternal or paternal instinct to give back to the next generation, to, you know, to take care of an animal, you know. So why? I mean, it's I don't know that Maul
no,
created
yeah,
Spybot, but sure seems like it when he's scratching his head. I mean, why does he have this droid, and why does it have that kind of relationship with it, that sort of like, you know, dog and owner,
yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, bond? Why is that there? And I think it's because, I think it's, to me it's very clear that he made Spybot at some point. I think it'd be a good comic book. Hint,
I think
hint,
it
if
would be
anyone
too.
in publishing is listening. It'd be cool. Anyway.
All right. No, I love it. Okay. So let's shift focus a little bit on
Yeah.
Maul. Um and let's talk about the sounds that we hear in the first 10 episodes.
Mm.
So one of the things I really enjoyed about this episode this season was the mixture of sights and sounds that were used. Um there was animation, but it looked like the animation was, we had still paintings and it would flow into the animation, and it was just so very cool, and I loved that a lot of, especially in like a lot of the night scenes and the sounds that we're hearing, and especially now I read something about this, and maybe you can verify this for me, if it's a possibility. um, I read that Sam, during the recording process for Maul's fight scenes, was adding sounds to the lightsaber battles, like to make the sabers scream as well.
Yeah, I mean, his voice is part of the saber battles, and it is part of the sabers. And the way that happened, um, to kind of explain, because you know that came out in a video where it's just kind of dropped on you without any explanation, and then it just happens. People were like, "Whoa!" So the story is that I had been experimenting all the way back to I think Tales of the Empire. No, Bad Batch season finale. I started thinking about weapon design and what happens. You know, there were these horrifying characters in the Bad Batch series finale that had these weapons, and I put in some little, human vocals into the swing sounds that are Doppler by, and I thought that was a cool effect. Then I did Tales of the Empire, and with the Night Sister arc of the Tales of the Empire, um, uh, what's her name? Morgan Elsbeth's mother,
Yeah.
the Night Sister at the top, had these scythes and these runes lit up on the sides. And when she swung them, I put in the sound of these sort of female screams. Like that's the Coven's magic working through those blades. And I thought that was really cool. So, at one point I'm working on the first pilot episode of Maul, chapter 1, and the front logo comes up, and Sam and I talk, and this must have been like a Tuesday or something. And I said, Sam, I'm working on this. Would you be willing to just go into the booth? Because he has a booth at home. I'm in my booth right now.
Sure.
And could you go in and just give me a file of just agonizing Maul screams? Because I think I want to use them over the opening logo, so you kind of hear Maul screaming over,
Nice.
chapter 1, whatever. And he said, sure. And he goes in, and a half hour later, I get a file of Sam just giving me these agonizing screams, which you can hear over the, chapter 1,
Right. Yeah.
whatever it's called. And so that's great. I do the first episode, second episode. By the time I get to the third episode, and I'm panning his voice around in Dolby Atmos when he's in the dark, kind of whispers in the dark with Devin,
Hmm.
and we get to that final battle where they're finally fighting on that bridge. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to try that idea again. And I went and I took Sam's Scream work print of all those different takes he did. And I just started processing it into this Doppler effect, Doppler when a car goes by really fast.
Hmm.
Meow, meow,
Yeah.
meow.
Yeah.
And so I made those, and I thought, wow, that's a really cool sound. And I had already cut in his lightsaber sound. And so I put that layer on top of it, and I loved the effect of it. And I put a lot of delay and reverb on it. And I had also recorded a group of us as actors going, Kora Ratama, all of that great John Williams Sanskrit from The Phantom Menace. And I wanted that sort of Maul aura in this episode, because this is his world and Devin is in it. And this, that kind of suspense and mystery and dark side energy flowing, it made sense to me that when Maul is dominating in a scene, that it would become bigger than life. And we were already doing that with the whispers and the throwing his voice around. It had already gotten surreal. So when we did that episode and I cut that in, yes, his sound of those screams that he did for me, I cut those into the lightsabers, and it just gave it this extra sort of anger. I mean,
Yes.
the visuals are painterly, but they're also jagged and very fiery, particularly the lightsabers. And so I wanted the sound of the show to be very real, 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 to lend even more credibility to the style of the show, that paintbrush stroke style. But I wanted it in some cases to be more surreal and bigger than life. And I think when you're doing those episodes with the Force and the mythology is really sort of taking over, and points of view are being discussed, I think it's okay to get uh, sort of surreal with sound. And when I did it, it just felt really good. And then of course I brought in the Kiner's music, and it was even better. And I just thought this is the right way to go. So I kept those swings going in the fourth episode when he's fighting Docky and Devin,
Yeah.
all the way up to the sixth episode on the train. You can hear it on the train too when he rescues Devin from Marok. But when he's on his back foot and the Inquisitors are after him, it goes away, because he's no longer in control of the scene. He's desperately
Right.
trying to get off planet. And I took them out of the show again at that point, because I wanted it to feel more like Maul dominating. That's a sound you would hear. And so, yes, long story short, I did take Sam's screams that he recorded for me, and I put them in with the lightsaber sounds. This is one of the thousands of things that we kind of think about and cut into the show. That was one of my favorites.
And that's exactly why I wanted to ask about it, because it's one of those things that as I was listening, watching the show and listening to the sounds and trying to pick up on all these little things, um, I heard that, and I actually had the same thought that, oh, okay, so he, even though technically no longer a Sith, he still focuses and channels very much into his anger, and so when he's in control, you're hearing his expression of his anger, and of course
Yeah.
that would go through his blade. And I was like, that was like, why haven't we done this before? It makes so much sense.
Oh,
And then
cool.
later, when I didn't hear it, I was like, well, where'd it go? And I kind of thought that, that maybe that was why, what you just explained. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
It becomes more grounded. And those are the same Ben Burt sounds from the Phantom Menace, especially when he's windmilling his saber like that. I did add this sort of high-end sizzle or sparkle to the blade to kind of make it more jagged. But I added it only to the original Ben Burt sounds because the lightsabers in this show, I really wanted to be a Star Wars anchor because everything about Janix was so new,
yes.
and by the time the Empire comes in, they take over and we're sort of back into familiar Imperial sound
Right.
territory with those classic Star Wars sounds. But at the top of the show, I felt like lightsabers were really important to be familiar to the audience. So I really wanted to use Ben's lightsaber sounds there. And I did modify them only to honor the style of the show and to kind of help tell the story. But the core of it is always Ben Burt because those sounds are just the sound has emotional memory and it's just burned into our brains from seeing that movie a
Yes.
million times. And I wanted to make sure that people knew this was Darth Maul.
Very cool. Yeah, I thought about that the entirety, those first couple episodes watching that, and it just, like I said, it made so much sense to me. So I'm glad to hear that's the reason why. It just it added so much, and so I want you to know it added so much to those scenes and the depth of
Oh,
his
cool.
character. By the way, I'm a massive Maul fanboy. He's my favorite
Cool.
villain. And so this
He's
was,
great.
for me, this series has been a revelation, and I've been so just ecstatic about it. And my only complaint about the series, and this is a very small complaint, is that it was only 10 episodes. So if that's my
Yeah.
complaint, I think we're doing pretty good, personally.
Yeah, and
so.
it very, very serialized. I mean, you could cut it together as a 3.5 hour plus movie. I mean, you really could.
Yeah.
It's just moment to moment to moment to moment to moment.
It flows so well.
Yeah, and it was that way by design, and then they release it 2x2, which I thought was really smart. And over 5 weeks, it was fun. It was fun to watch everyone's reactions. And the thing is that I knew that the show it starts strong, but it goes crazy. So if people liked it at first, I was like, I was sitting there for 5 weeks going, just wait till next week, just wait till next week. Every week I did that. That was really fun. It was really fun.
I had a similar reaction, except for mine was, why do I gotta wait till next week? So
I know.
We've gotten so used to the the in the age of streaming where it's just, here's everything, enjoy it.
Yeah.
And but I do like going back to the getting the new, and that's one of the things I've loved about what Star Wars has done over the last however many years with the releases. It's not, well, here it is, enjoy it. It's, here's an episode, here's 2 episodes, okay, come back next week, and we get to have these conversations, and it's rekindled the nerd chatter between episodes. Or what do you think is going to happen? And so from a podcasting point of view, to everyone at Star Wars and Lucasfilm and whoever else is in that decision-making process, thank you for rekindling nerd chatter.
Well, you know what? And that's an interesting one. I remember Sam and I talking when he was really nervous about how Spider Maul was going to go over, because it was a very, very bold departure.
Yeah.
It was a George Lucas departure. It was an idea that came from George. And Sam had played it and he had improvised a lot of that stuff. And he's crazy. He's lost his mind in anger and anguish and pain and grief. And then finally he kind of comes back to a more familiar Maul, if people, knew Maul from the Phantom Menace, which we did. But that period in between, that week between when that aired and the next episode aired, when he was going to be a little bit more in line with people's expectation of what Maul would sound like or be like, he was very nervous. And I remember saying, I get it, but just remember, and I say this to fans too, this is a temporary problem, because historically you will only have this problem for 1 week. And then the
Right.
next episode will be out and everyone will have forgotten about it and then for the rest of its life, it will be out there together. So what I try and say to people is, enjoy these times. As agonizing as it is to wait from one episode to the next or one movie to the next, enjoy that period of time because the time of wondering what's going to happen in the sequel trilogy is over. The time that of wondering what's going to happen in Mandalorian season 2 is over, and it will never be
Yes.
repeated. It's out. So those are really special moments in time for Star Wars fans, for any nerddom, I think, podcasting, where you get to talk about what's coming up, and then once it's out, so I actually kind of have grown to relish those times, as agonizing as
Yes.
they can be, because you do speculating and waiting. That's half the fun, I
Oh,
think.
absolutely. Yeah. At first I was like, oh, why can't we just have it? Now I'm at the point where I enjoy that. I
Yeah,
look forward to that. I like having, I'll complain about not being able to watch it because
of course.
that's the want
Yeah,
in me to have the ooh shiny must have. Let me touch it. Let me feel it. Let me grab it.
yeah,
But I also like having the expectation. And so I'm looking forward to, and you guys had a really good cliffhanger going into season 2. So I'm looking forward to seeing what
cool.
happens in season 2. So,
Yeah,
hey guys, and by the way, if you're liking, and for our listeners, if you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to click that like and follow button. All right, so David, I want to take a quick departure from Star Wars because I could sit and talk Star Wars with you all day, but Star Wars is not the only thing that you've ever worked on.
hmm
Outside of the Star Wars universe, you've lent your voice to characters in Battlefield, CSI video games, Thrillville, Twisted Metal, Hunter x Hunter, God of War. There's a litany of other things.
hmm
One of the questions I love to ask voice actors is, what is the most unusual or most unlikely spot that you've heard your voice while out in the wild?
Oh, interesting. Probably Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, although it's Star Wars, so I just completely foiled your plan to get away from Star Wars. That's one. I voice Oga in Oga's Cantina, but that doesn't really mean much. It just means that this disembodied voice comes in and interrupts the fun, as the bartenders respond probably every 15 minutes. And I did a lot of radio DJing there. I've heard it, I was the voice of Capital One's phone system for like 18 years. So when
Okay.
you called and you checked your credit card, if you had a Capital One credit card, that was me saying, "Thank you for calling Capital One. To get started, please say or enter your 16-digit card number." I did that for years. I
I
did.
cursed at you. It's fine.
I'm
Uh,
sorry. I honestly, I don't know your account balances. I swear. I did that before AI came in and took those jobs. I did. What else in the wild? I've done just commercials here and there. Like Burger King commercials or car commercials or things like that. I don't really do many commercials anymore. That was kind of 10, 15 years ago. Sometimes what'll be interesting is, I'm known for Star Wars, but I did 4 seasons of playing the dad in The Boss Baby back in business for Netflix.
yes.
And the amount of people sometimes reach out to me about Star Wars, but the amount of high school friends that reached out to me was bigger for that than anything else, because their kids would just be watching, especially during the pandemic, they'd be watching Netflix and they'd be like, "I hear David Collins. I hear what," and then they would sit there and look at the credits and be like, "Oh," and it was just me. It was my voice. Timmy,
Okay.
I mean, that's it. And it was a great chance to kind of show off comedy chops and just play with the rest of the cast. Um, I do go to the movies and I hear my voice, or in Loop Group, and you never know what's going to happen. So whether it's a Knives Out movie or it's a Marvel movie. I think I had a line with Harrison Ford in the Captain America: Brave New World movie. Just
Okay.
really a lot of just different background characters. Um, that stuff is really fun. Fantastic Four, Superman. Um, I do a lot of Loop Group, what's called Loop Group, where they bring in
Yeah.
actors to do a lot of background characters and things like that.
Right.
So it just kind of exists out there. It's in The Mandalorian and Grogu, if you've seen it. You know, in the beginning of the movie,
Awesome.
I voiced a
Yes.
lot of stormtroopers, but sir, we're pilots. Like, you know, uh, there's a lot of stuff like that. You
Okay.
know, anime dubs. You know, and sometimes I finally have had this happen in my career where a credit shows up on my IMDb and I had no memory voicing it. And then I'll go look it up on YouTube and I'll be like, oh yeah, I did do that.
I
Or
did do that. Yeah.
someone will ask me, they're like, hey, someone was interested in this Marvel character you did. Did you do that? And I said, I don't know. Let's see. And I'll be like, I looped on X-Men 97. I did WandaVision. I don't know. I didn't watch that. I don't know. Should I go watch it? Like, so that happens now, you know? And I think that happens more and more when you come in as a day player and you play 5 different bit parts and then you leave and then a year or two goes by and it's finally out, you know, and you forget because you're busy on Maul Shadow Lord or something, you know. So that happens every once in a while.
All right.
It's a great
Okay.
problem to have. Now that I'm thinking about it, that sounds really yeah, it's a great problem to have. I'm very, very lucky that I get to do these things and don't take it for granted,
No,
even
that's
though I
great.
forget sometimes.
Um, no, that's a very reasonable answer, honestly, with, especially being in a variety of different loop groups, makes complete sense to me. Now, I just, so the background of that story, or that question rather, I asked that because uh, one of the things that cracked me up, and the reason why I asked it, is I had Dave Fennoy on, the voice of
Oh yeah.
Colin Krell,
Uh-huh.
and Dave was telling me how he was doing, for the longest time, he was the voice of the Time Life music videos. The Time Life music collection CDs. Six
Yeah.
discs with 180,000 songs that will change your
Yeah.
life, and and all these things. And I was like, oh, that was you. And he was also the voice, on Hulu for the first few years.
Yeah, I
This
remember that.
advertisement. Yeah, that was all
Yeah.
Dave. And so
Yeah.
it's just like, and after a while, I was like, that's kind of a fun question to figure out where I've heard these people's voices before
Yeah.
I heard their voice in something that I was paying attention to,
Well, I'll
you
tell
know,
you
and
that Capital One thing really helped. I mean, because you put in I recorded it every week for 18 years, and in a lot of it in this room. And you know, when you're doing that much, it's the reason why when I get called up and someone says, "Oh, someone needs to be Luthen Rail's Fondor Hallcraft ship computer," you know, and I go, "Countermeasures armed," you know, "Setting course for Aldani," and it's because I have a sound and a mic technique because I put in all those hours
sure.
leveling and being directed to have this sort of level speech. I think it's why I do so many droids. And in fact, I booked that gig right after I played Proxy. I booked it in
Oh, okay.
2009. So I was in the middle of doing Force Unleashed 2, and I was going and recording a full library for Capital One. And that is the longest voice gig I've ever had. And um, yeah, it was, and I did a lot of audiobooks too. And when you do audiobooks, I probably did, I don't know, a couple dozen audiobooks about, I don't know, 12, 15
Okay.
years ago. And when you are recording that much and listening to your own voice and working on mic technique, uh, you know, that actually really does help you land more parts because you kind of know what your voice is going to do on the mic. You know what different mics are going to do with your voice, and
Okay.
you know, it definitely helps. But yeah, I would say Capital One's probably the biggest, most significant one in terms of helping me, you know, find my sound on mic. That and
All
looping
right.
Star Wars.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, David, up to this point, you have answered all of my questions very admirably. But now I feel it's time to ask you what we call our silly question.
Okay.
It's really not all that silly, if I'm being 100% honest. Where it comes from, build you a small clock to tell you the time. Uh, my live show co-host, her name is Kathleen. She has a daughter who's now 7. A year or two ago, her and her daughter were walking through town. They stopped somewhere, and somebody asked her daughter this question, but did not ask Kathleen. And Kathleen thought, well, that's very rude. You should never age out of this question. And so that question is, David W. Collins, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Well, that's a great question. Um, you know what's weird is, um, I suppose everyone will talk about the T-Rex, you know, And I have different dinosaurs where I love Gary Rydstrom's work in Jurassic Park,
Hmm.
but I think my favorite dinosaur as a kid, if I remember well, was the Triceratops.
Yes.
And I think it was because the images that I saw as a kid, there was always this towering T-Rex and there was this Triceratops holding its own against the T-Rex, and it had these great three horns and this big shield.
Yes.
And I think on a unconscious level, emotionally related more to the Triceratops in that scenario than I did the big, confident bullying T-Rex. I loved that the Triceratops I loved the sort of David and Goliath of it, I think. Maybe that has something to do with my name being David too. I have no idea. But anyway, maybe the Triceratops. Although, if you were to talk Transformers, it would have to be Grimlock, and he's a T-Rex. Grimlock was my favorite, of Grimlock, Slag,
That's
Sludge,
fair.
Snarl, and Swoop. For all you Gen 1 Transformers out there, Gen
Very
Xers.
nice. Love
I
the
was a
reference.
huge Transformer Gen 1 guy. In fact, this is my phone case right here.
Love it.
And so, but because I think Slag was the name of the Triceratops in that, but I
I think you're
loved
correct. Yes.
Grimlock. So my favorite Dinobot, Grimlock. My favorite dinosaur, Triceratops. I'm gonna go with that.
Love it. And I celebrated so quickly because that is also my favorite dinosaur.
Hey,
So
all
getting the
right,
win. All right. Go Team Triceratops. All right.
nice.
Well, David, thank you so much for being on Pop Culture Addicts today. Where can our listeners and viewers go to find out more about you, your work, and what you have coming next?
Yeah, I'm on social media pretty much everywhere at David W. Collins. So that's a pretty good bet. If you search that, I'll be there. I am. I can share that I'm actually going to be doing the convention circuit for the rest of the year with some other members of the Maul cast. We're doing
Nice.
at the time of this recording, we're doing Fan Expo Denver this weekend, but this year we'll also be at Fan Expo Anaheim in June, Fan Expo Chicago and Toronto in August, Dallas in September. And I think that's all we've announced for now. But we're really starting
Okay.
to go out and want to meet people and do panels for the show. And so I'm really
Perfect.
looking forward to that. And please, if you're interested in more discussion about how sound and film and music all works in some of your favorite movies and TV shows, please check out my podcast. It's called The Soundtrack Show. And I analyze film scores and I talk about what it does to your favorite characters. You do not need to be a musician to appreciate the show. It's not about that.
Love it.
It's about celebrating the movies and the characters that you love.
Love it. All right. I will make sure that we get links for both your podcast and your social media in the notes below so everybody can check those out.
Cool.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching and or listening today on Pop Culture Addicts. Be sure to follow David on his social media. Like I said, there'll be some links and some information in the show notes down below. Now, if you like what you heard today, be sure to click that like and follow button. And if you're a pop culture addict like us nerds here, be sure to consider, how about that? Please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast listening platform, or just put a comment here on what you liked about this interview with the amazing David W. Collins here on YouTube. So thank you for watching and or listening. Thank you to David W. Collins for being on the show today. And until next time, nerds, may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Pop Culture Addicts. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@pcapod.com.